Hello there, and I just wanted to show you a little tool that I've built in my VR version of Flock. Now, it can be quite tricky. I just work on my own and keeping abreast of all the snags and debugs that I want to do as I'm exploring. So I just wanted to share a tip really on how I work once I am in VR. So you'll have to imagine this, but in my top left-hand pocket of my shirt, I have my phone, and I dictate to my phone just by calling Siri and asking her to make some notes as I'm going around. So I'm not having to dip in and out. I can just spend 20 minutes putting together a big snag list, and then rather than chipping away and doing one thing at a time, I can go through everything at once. Alongside that, I have a few things that I have set up as tools. So I'll show you on my settings. So at the moment I've just got the plain settings, which would be the user focus settings. But when I quickly pop to the keyboard, so in my game instance I have is VR debug visible. So I just go into there, and by checking that on, a few things happen. I get my sphere trace for VR, so I know when I'm hitting things. In front of me you'll see a few text render objects that are part of my motion controller pawn. I'm just pulling in variables and giving myself a kind of real-time update. So for example here, if I'm looking at, so you can see now, when I'm moving my hand up, that yellow line at the bottom is telling me the widget that my hit interaction component, the sphere, is hitting. So I'm hitting the VR widget in BP board 4. So I can kind of get a sense of what's going on. Now going back to my settings, you can see that I've actually now revealed a couple of other things in here, and these are just for me to debug. So I can turn on collisions, and now I can see a few things that I need to do when I come to optimizing and spring tidying this project. So there's a lot of kind of invisibles here. They won't mean a huge amount to you at this stage, but let me explain a couple of things. So for example here, the big rectangle box is a overlap component for the screen, and I don't need it to be necessarily that big. I can make that a little bit smaller. I used this method of showing collision to make sure that certain components were deleted, so I obviously didn't need that component as part of this actor or this instance of the actor. That's the same because it's another showroom. So all this kind of hidden knowledge, if only we could do this in the real world sometimes, it would make life a little bit easier, but I can kind of get a sense of some of the interactions that I've created and why in some instances things aren't working, because I might be blocking something that I can't see. Another key on the keyboard, and the reason I had to put it on the keyboard as opposed to adding it to this menu, was switching things to wireframe, which again gives me a sense of what's going on. So again, I know what I'm looking at, so it might be a bit intimidating, but it certainly helps with the way that I need to manage things. So those volumes there, I now aren't actually using those, so I could delete those out of the blueprint board actor. So just things like that that I might forget by having a couple of run-throughs, one with collision on and one with, I can turn. See, this is my point. I can't actually see the menu, hence me having to add it to the keyboard. I'll show you how this is all put together in the blueprints, but I can put in any execute console command. This is just an execute console command, so where I'm turning it on and off. But that same piece of functionality, I can do anything. I can change the screen percentage if I want, or a whole host of other console commands, but that's just here to illustrate the point. Let's dive into the blueprints. Well, first things first, I have to apologise for the quality of the sound in that VR grab. I couldn't see the mic as the message said, so invariably I was facing the wrong way and had to boost the audio quality, which can be a little problematic. So anyway, what we will start with is looking at my VR settings widget, which I create a list of console command related buttons, and I'll show you how I've built that. So in my widget, I have a vertical box, which is just a container, and I just have that placed there for now. I then have a separate widget, which is a master button. So all I have is the button with a block of text in it. Now, a couple of things. In that blueprint graph, I have button text, which is an instance editable string and exposed on spawn. Now, I'm exposing that on spawn because we are creating multiple instances of that button and therefore that variable, and pulling through the button text, which is also the console command string, which is getting executed here. So that will make sense in a moment, but let's just look at what is in this blueprint graph, which is hardly anything for this widget. So the button, on clicked, executes the console command, which is passed through using the button text variable. And then I just did a flip-flop, which is literally a toggle, so that when it's pressed for the first time, I think by default it is red, so it's off. So I just did a flip-flop where I'm taking that button text, which is a variable, and I'm making it green when it's on and red when it's off. So I've just got a visual cue, although it's kind of blatantly obvious on the examples I've shown. But as that list grows with varying console commands, I can obviously have a couple on at the same time, and there may be conflict. So I can just at a glance understand which of the ones are on or off when I look at the menu when it's populated here. So coming to VR settings, let's have a look at our vertical box. Now let's have a look at, find references to that. I think it's on event construct. Where did I put it? Yeah, on event construct, I've actually sort of looped it round and created it as part of this sequence. As I mentioned in the VR video, I've set up a global variable which is VR debug visible? Okay, which is just a boolean that I then only have to go to the game instance to turn that on or off. And where I have called this, because I have called it in a few different places, obviously here it's within the widget, but I'm also using it in the motion controller pawn, where I am turning on or off those text render lines of text that were in front of me when I was looking in VR. So it's just becomes a universal switch for turning on or off my debugging. We'll come back to that, and that'll make sense when we look at it used in different places. I have a local variable which I have called VR debug console commands, and I've made that an array. In that array are those first three console commands that you saw in my hidden menu. So show collision, render screen percentage 10%, render screen percentage 100%. Now the beauty of this system is that as I want to add new functionality, all I do is update this list. So I could have 100 console commands looking at all sorts of different I could turn on the frame rate, I could turn on the show by using show FPS or stat unit, or a whole host of things I can trigger using this system. I've just got 3, 0 to 2. So I am looking at that array, getting the last index and making sure that that then becomes the last index in this for loop. And then on each index, so 0, 1, 2, so I'm saying create button alone widget. And because we have exposed the button text, if you don't know how to do that, if you look at the widget playlist, you'll get a full understanding of how powerful that is. We have that exposed on spawn here. So when we've added this node, now I am basically saying on loop, go from 0. So 0, get that first console command, which is show collision, create a widget and add it as a child to the vertical box, which is VR debug. And that just loops around 3 times and therefore creates 3 buttons based on our list of 3. But at the same time, we're using the console command to also act as the label for the text, because this text block we have also bound it to the button text variable. So not only does it trigger that execute command, but it uses that execute command to label that button. So there's no way of kind of mucking that up because it's the same information. Okay, now that's all it is. So that is how I can build a list of console command related dynamic buttons, in this case in VR, but can work anywhere else. Now coming back out to my collection and looking at my game instance. So this is my game instance for this project, so it's a beast. If I go to GI is VR debug visible, so here by default it's off. If I turn that on, then when I launch the project I would have the sphere trace and I would have the text renders visible. But all I've done, again coming back to my Flock player controller, I've added that game instance variable. This is a keystroke basically because I've set up the input action in my project. I'll do a video that goes into this. There's lots of videos about this on YouTube, but I'll just explain it very briefly here. I set up 2 new bindings for action mappings. One which was the VR toggle, so I was clicking the home button on my extended keyboard, and then where's the other one? I put it somewhere else here, wireframe debug, so I used the page up button, mainly because I've got lots of other buttons assigned to other things as tools as I was debugging the desktop version. Anyway, so they you know, I could just add an input here, but I've set them up as action mapping, so I could have done that and found the home button. That's effectively the same thing, but this is written to the setup file. Anyway, the point being that that keystroke toggles on whether or not the VR debug boolean is true or false, and similarly for wireframe. So I've just got that here. So here with wireframe it's slightly different. When I press the whatever it was, the page up button, the first time the console command for that is view mode wireframe, and then if you want to come out of wireframe you just have to say view mode lit, and that toggles wireframe on or off. Now that variable though, so if the variable was false, which was the default setting, it's not going to create that button list. So when I launched that settings menu, this was off, and therefore it didn't trigger the for loop and create the buttons. It was all conditional to that. So, you know, that's quite a powerful thing to just put in the game instance, because it means that as long as you're consistent and you're relying on using booleans to kind of partition different debugging tools, then your game instance, you can just go in and turn them on or off. And it's all in one place. You could, of course, create an editor utility widget, but we'll reserve that for another video. I've got a pawn overlap checker blueprint component here. I've got 3 different types of pawns for when it is either VR desktop or the touring version of the desktop version, which sounds a bit complex, but this component I then make use here as to whether or not I want the sphere trace to be visible. I've got a debug variable here which is local, but depending on whether it's the VR version or the mobile VR version, I'm basically saying if that variable in the game instance is true, then set the debug to for 1 frame, otherwise turn it off. So therefore that controls the visibility of that sphere trace. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It's more really to demonstrate the techniques of being able to create your own tools to help your debugging. And I really enjoy creating these kind of little tools for particular use cases, and they've been a lifesaver in terms of really giving me some additional feedback. Because, you know, sometimes when you're spawning and destroying or hiding or fading out materials, then there are some legacy issues that tools like this can help iron out and help with optimizing. So there we are. So hopefully that's of use. If these videos are giving you some value, then please do like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. So thank you for your support.